Welcome everyone back to a brand new episode of Let's Talk Broncos. I'm Brie Maestas and I'm back. Zach Seegers, Joey Richards join me as always. Guys, how are you?
Doing really good. I mean, it was the news, and I've said this for like 6 podcasts in a row, but the news is not slowing down. This offseason is starting off red hot with all the coaching stuff, right? Like, we already have 2 coach interviews in the bag. More to come soon. We're starting off red hot, so I'm excited to get into this podcast. Zach, how are you feeling, man?
I'm feeling great. Excited to talk some coaching stuff here. And then we'll get into some awards stuff later on. I imagine at some point in the week or in these coming weeks. I'm excited. I think this pocket of time right after the end of the season is a fun time. We've got lots of fresh stuff to talk about. So it'll be fun. And this is going to be one of those fresher shows.
It is going to be one of those fresher shows. And if the LTB community is wondering what we were going to talk about 6 days a week, I have news for you. We will be dropping down to 3 Let's Talk Broncos episodes per week, and then a 4th episode for Let's Talk Draft. So Joey and Frankie aren't going anywhere. Neither are the trio of us. We're going to talk all things Broncos because there's going to be nonstop news through the off season, and can't wait to cover it along with you all. I'm just waiting. We are live. So if you want to jump on in and engage with the show, all you have to do is go over to YouTube or Facebook and comment over there. We'll highlight your questions, answer your concerns, all of the fun stuff that comes along with being a live show. Our next show will be, I believe, Thursday, and then we'll be back to you with Let's Talk Broncos on another day yet to be determined. Joey, you're muted.
Joey.
Hey guys, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Sorry about that. I want no prep. We might be dropping down to 3 shows, but all that means, guys, is those 3 shows are going to be action packed. That's what that means. We're getting more info through those days, and we're going to present it live. It's going to be a great time.
Yeah, it will be a great time. I was just fixing your mic settings, so hopefully you don't get cut again. Lots of people popping in. Wayne King, nice to see you. Samuel Castro as well, hopping in the chat, giving the wave and the peace sign. Love it. Appreciate you being here. I think we should just get right into it. Been a lot of news, I guess, as we start to decipher the head coaching search, and so we're trying to parse through all of that information. It is coming in fairly quickly, so if you'd like all up to date information, you can go on over to the Let's Talk Broncos Twitter at the LTB podcast. So we're posting news as it becomes live. The guys are doing a great job with that. And I want to kind of ask you guys, there's a lot of candidates already. Look at that fantastic graphic. There's a lot of interest surrounding a lot of different candidates here. And I think we should do home team hero first. I think we should just hop directly into Coach Evero, just because of the tremendous job that he's done with this defense this entire season. Obviously getting the nod, getting to interview. And I think that was the appropriate thing to do by the Denver Broncos. And I think that's where we're going to start this evening. But first, we're going to cue up a little clip so Justin Simmons can tell you about it himself.
Yeah, he's one of the best leaders I've been around. I think it speaks volumes to the testament of. I mean, obviously you can't take away last week's game, but minus that game, the way that the defense has answered the bell, and obviously there's tremendous talent player wise on the defense, but I always think that's speaks volumes to a leadership standpoint. The way that your guys respond to some adversity, and I felt like most of the year, all year for the most part, guys have always responded in a really positive manner. And and I think that's because of Coach E. Like I said, I think he's one of the brightest minds I've been around, and one of the best leaders. So I think he obviously would be at the top of the list for that.
Some of the things that you're going to want to see out of a head coaching candidate here for the Denver Broncos is their ability to step into a situation Thankfully, Coach Evero knows the situation, knows it well and intimately, and would be able to come in knowing exactly how this team has been functioning through the entirety of their 2022 season. I think that to me is why he seems like such a viable candidate for this position. I know going to a first time head coach seems a little uneasy for some folks given the track record there, but I don't think we want to discount um, a coach like Coach Evero, just because of the way that he's been able to handle all the pitfalls of this season. Guys, I'm going to throw it over to you. How do you feel about this? What are your thoughts on Coach Evero? Do you think he's ready to be a head coach, specifically for a team like the Denver Broncos who needs to make certain waves in order to see success in 2023?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like the Broncos want to go towards a veteran option, but Evero, I mean, the job he's done this year has been awesome. It's been really awesome. The players have had absolutely nothing bad to say about him. And you just heard it from Justin Simmons, like a team captain, how big he's been to this Broncos team. And you just don't even have to hear it from the Broncos players. The results are there as well. He's been amazing. A little more than Fangio, he's been able to create pressure, which is a big deal, especially on that defensive side of the ball. It's not just rush 4. If your guys get there, they get there. He's been able to create it with different looks and designs, which is really cool to see. And then, I hope that Evero's around either way. Whether he gets his head coach job, I want him around. If he doesn't, I want him as the defensive coordinator. I'm hoping that, selfishly, that he doesn't take that Texans job. Obviously, they fired 2 back-to-back first-time head coaches. I imagine, I would want a job with a little more stability, not even Broncos' point of view, of just Evero. I would want a job with more stability. So I really hope he doesn't get that job. But will he be taken all that seriously? I'm not sure from the Broncos. I think he deserves the interview. I think that he will. He obviously already had it today. But when you have a Jim Harbaugh, a Sean Payton, some of these other guys that are part of this coaching carousel here with Broncos, it's hard for me to imagine him beating those guys out. So I think that if a Jim Harbaugh, a Sean Payton, even like a D'Amico Ryans takes the job or wants the job, the Broncos will give it to him. It's rare for a first-time defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator to get a head coach job. So, that's kind of my opinion there. Zach, what do you have on there?
Yeah, I think when you look at the positives with Evero, it boils down to 2 things: that defensive innovation, that defensive creativity. There are some graphs out there that are way above my head. I don't know how they even tell a computer to chart these things, but basically, at least how I understand them to work, is it'll scan, what the defense is doing on all 22 and determine what the defense is doing and compare it to what else is happening in the league. And end of the story, it's one of the most unique defenses in the NFL. I think it was the second most unique by this metric, kind of in this own world. So the defensive innovation you love to see. I think the other big thing he's got going for him are the relationships he's already built up with these players. You hear how the players talk about him, and it's not just as like Vic Fangio, oh, he's such a smart defensive guy. It's as a leader. It's as someone they love playing for, someone that helps them out, someone that helps them see the game differently. And so I think he checks a lot of boxes. The concerns for me are going to be the lack of experience. He is one of there's 2 of the 6 candidates have less than 20 years of upper level NFL coaching experience. And Evero, and that's Evero and Ryans, and they're at 7. Everyone else has 20 plus, and they're at 7, and Ryans is at, I think, 5. And then total years in the NFL, Evero's a little better. He's up to 18. It's just taken him a while to get the big opportunities. So that's a positive, but just the lack of experience. And then he has the stink of him from the Nathaniel Hackett era. There's more problems with this team than just Nathaniel Hackett. There's more problems with this coaching staff than just Nathaniel Hackett, Butch Berry, and Dwayne Stukes. I think you want a fresh take coaching staff. I think hiring Evero would, in a sense, feel like running it back. And I think you look at the complete and utter failure of the 2022 season, and I think it's hard to run it back. The last little note I'd say, and I'm a big Evero fan with what he's done on defense, but the defense did take a considerable step back since the Bradley Chubb trade. And I do think that taints the resume just a little bit. I'm still a big Evero guy. I think he's going to go on to be a great head coach in this league at some point. But I think there's a reason why Vegas has him as the longest shot out of the options here.
I definitely think that's fair. I don't know if the onus on the Denver Broncos defense going from 1 to around 5th or 10th or however you want to look at those numbers is a lot to do with injuries as well. I don't want to discount that whatsoever. I think what he did with that defense and keeping them at that level mid-season, it seemed to fall off appropriately with given the amount of injuries. But yeah, the trade absolutely impacted that. I think that it impacted the locker room and how that defense was going to be able to run what they had in mind. So I don't know, that seems like something that I would just not push back on, because I know that you're not saying that it's not important there as well. Wayne King says, I disagree with it. Feel like a run it back here. He probably did not have a whole lot to say. Interesting. That's an interesting comment there. I want to.
A lot of the staff would stay intact. And in that sense, it would feel like run it back here. There's other problems with this staff and with the coaching of this team. And I don't know if Evero would necessarily remedy those concerns.
I wonder though, Zach, and I'm not pushing back because I do think that Evero is probably a year away from getting a head coaching job. Like, for me to feel comfortable with it, I wouldn't want to see another year. I wouldn't want to hire a first-time defensive coordinator, right? I mean, like, Aaron Glenn was a big-time guy last year. Now I've only seen him have one job interview after a year removed, right? But at the same time, I can't imagine that offensive staff being anywhat similar. And I imagine that if they bring in another coach that hires him retains him as defensive coordinator, that defensive staff is going to look the same. And I think that's something we all want. I think we all want him at least back as defensive coordinator.
The defensive staff I'm with, I think if you make him the head coach, your running back, there's a very good chance your running back Justin Outen as offensive play caller. I know people are excited about over these last 2 weeks. I think that's putting a lot of stock into 30 minutes or 60 minutes and 30 seconds of the 120 non-Hackett minutes we've seen. It's about bringing it's running back too much of the old gang. I imagine Ben Steele is the offensive line coach in that world. I would rather look for who's out there, maybe hire someone with good connections in terms of offensive line coaching or defensive line coaching or something. The staff would be part of my concern with Evero.
All right. Good conversations surrounding that. I want to hop on over to another defensive coordinator who is quite possibly up for the job in the 49ers, D'Amico Ryans. What I'm interested to hear is how you think he would fit in, given similar, I guess, opportunities as well. I don't know much about what he's done. All I know is that the 49ers are at it and their defense is nothing to scoff at. So tell me, how much of their success is based on what Ryans is doing over there? And how do you think he would fit in here with the organization?
My pitch on D'Amico Ryans to Broncos country is he's everything you liked about Vic Fangio with none of the stuff you didn't like. I think he's a defensive genius. I think he's going to give you a schematic advantage week in, week out. When you look at his track record with player development, players under him have taken giant leaps in development, even those like Arden Key that were thought to be washed up, busted commodities before playing under D'Amico Ryans. I think it's really, and then where you might be annoyed with Fangio's old school temperament or his lack of affability, or the fact he maybe at times didn't know how to run a modern NFL locker room. You don't have any of those concerns with D'Amico Ryans. He's Vic Fangio if you made him young, analytics-focused players coach. it's a really nice idea. And then there's a chance he could put together an extremely compelling staff. Extremely compelling. Defensive coordinator to watch is Chris Kasarik. Who is Chris Kasarik, you might ask? Like the Mike Munchak of defensive line coaching, is how I describe him to Broncos country. Wildly well respected. Very good player development background as well in his own right. But then schematically, his wide nine splits, how he takes his edge rushers and really throws them out there, builds a lot of space, has been transformative, and has been a really unique thing we've seen in San Francisco that started to sweep the league a little bit. But no one coaches it up as well as Chris Kasarik. And then he will be very familiar with all the Shanahan trees. Which means he could probably bring over a coveted young mind from one of them. So that all excites me a ton. I'm a big fan of DeMeco Ryans.
For me, DeMeco Ryans is my third favorite coach. In this, I think that besides the top two, right? Like I think the obvious, and we'll get into it. I think we all know. I don't even have to bring him up, and we'll get to him later. But he is my third favorite. Now, I love him for different reasons than Zach loves him, or I think similar reasons, but I kind of disagree on one point. Like, he's an awesome defensive coach. I mean, like, but he hasn't been long enough. He hasn't been long enough for me to compare him to like Vic Fangio, because I think Fangio did it for so many years. But I don't want to get into that totally conversation. But he is a really, really good defensive coach. The 49ers have the number one defense in the NFL this year. They have been amazing under DeMeco Ryans. But the main reason I love DeMeco Ryans is because I think that he can really build a winning culture down here. That is my biggest selling point. I think that I want to highlight this. Like, a lot of people will describe Hackett as a player's coach because the players do like Hackett. The difference with DeMeco Ryans is like, DeMeco is a former star player. Like, DeMeco Ryans was a really good linebacker in the NFL, played for the Houston Texans. And he demands a different type of respect, being a former player. I love him. I think he's one of my favorites. And like Zach said, he can bring, I mean, that 49ers, like over there, he has connections to a plethora of really good coaches over there that he could possibly bring to Denver. And yeah, he's my third favorite. I love DeMeco Ryans. He's a guy that I would be really happy about. The biggest question with him, I have to say this, I don't have any worries about the defensive side of the ball. I would want to see who he brings over. In those interviews, that would be the main thing that you're asking him. Who are you going to bring over as offensive coordinator? Who's running that offensive side of the ball for you? And you also need to be sold on that guy. That's the biggest flag, I guess I would say, for DeMeco Ryans. But other than that, awesome defensive coordinator league. And I think he deserves an opportunity like this.
That does beg the question, is if you're bringing in a coach that is a defensive mind, who's a tremendous defensive mind, are you losing the idea that Russell Wilson needs to be fixed going into 2023? Or are you hoping that that staff is that great that they're able to see that turnaround? I think that's why there's been so much focus on the top two candidates, because there are a lot of candidates here for the Broncos coaching position that are former defensive coordinators. Although I do want to, as long as you're done talking about DeMeco Ryans, I mean, we can continue to. I didn't want to cut you off here. But another candidate available would be obviously Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator for the Rams, and had head coaching experience there with the Buccaneers. How do you feel he would fit in, having a little bit of that experience, but also working on the defensive side of the ball?
It's funny. I'm surprised we're starting with these three, but it's perfect because these are the three I wrote about in my article that just dropped minutes before we went live over on milehighsports.com. I know we normally promo at the end, but please check that out. It's like 1,800 words. I dove really deep into all these coaches' backgrounds. With Raheem Morris, what I think you like with him, the knock with DeMeco Ryans is going to be the lack of experience. Evero, 7 years of higher level coaching. By that, I mean position coach, coordinator, or head coach. He has 7 years right now. Ryans only has 5. Total NFL years, though, Evero has 18. Ryans only has 7. So like barely any, or actually 6, I think. So barely any coaching experience. He's done very, very well in that limited time, but it is an extremely limited amount of time, especially when you consider Evero's at 18, and then every other Broncos candidate is at like 20 plus of years coaching. So it's a rapid ascension for D'Amico Ryans. He's earned that rapid ascension, but a bit of a concern there. Morris is the opposite. Like Ryans, he's a player coach. I love the defensive ingenuity you've seen him have. The defense he ran when he was a head coach for the quote unquote Youngry Bucks was very different from the defense he ran when he took over for Dan Quinn, because the personnel was very different. Oh, and by the way, when he took over for Dan Quinn, the defense improved, and they had that was the best Falcons defense during a season where Dan Quinn was the head coach. Was the year when Dan Quinn was fired 5 weeks into the season and Raheem Morris came over and took over as interim head coach. So when we're looking at these 6 prospective candidates, that's at least one feather in Raheem Morris's cap over Dan Quinn. And then you see him go to the Rams and run, again, a wildly different defensive scheme. I also think he had to do it in a different way than Brandon Staley. He didn't just run exactly what Staley ran. He built off of it in his own unique way with the penny package that you then see Evero adopt and take over to the Broncos. Evero has gushed about him as a potential future head coach. So has Sean McVay. Sean McVay talked about how absolutely this guy's going to be a head coach again, and he's going to be a great one. The way he leads the locker room and everything. And his problem-solving ability, something I really want to see in my head coach, especially the one taking over this version of the Denver Broncos, is the ability to solve problems. When like new stuff was thrown at you, how did you adapt on the fly to it? And I think we've seen that with Raheem Morris, and I think we've seen it with Ejiro Evero too, with his creativity.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of nailed a lot of the you nailed a lot of those points. Like, I don't have a ton to add there. I think like everything that I'd say is, hey guys, it really feels like the Broncos are looking for somebody with experience, and then this is a guy with a lot of experience, like a ton. That's one thing I do have to say. Like, his first head coaching opportunity came all the way back in 2008 to climb to where he is right now to get another opportunity. He's a guy that, I mean, he's definitely earned the opportunity to do it again. He's shown you time in and time out that he should be in this position. For a lot of the reasons Zach said, his ability to adapt has been amazing. You saw him go and make a Dan Quinn defense better once he replaced Dan Quinn. Like, there's a lot of reasons to like him. Zach or Bree, do you have anything to add to him before I ask a question here?
No, ask away.
Okay. I just want to ask, would you rather, because right now we're talking about our third options, right? I mean, we still have 2 more to get to, but obviously we will get to them. They're the big names. It's already been widely reported that these are the guys the Broncos want. But as a third option, who would you like more, Morris or Ryans? That's off the rest.
Ryans. I really think Ryan, like, sometimes I understand the fear about lack of experience. I think one thing that makes Ryan's lack of experience easier to swallow is his playing background. He spent a very long time in the NFL as a player. And he also was lauded during his playing career for his wisdom and ability in the locker room. For that reason, Kyle Shanahan said that his nickname as a rookie in the Houston Texans locker room was Mufasa, because everyone just viewed him as this wise, elderly lion, even though he was the rookie on the team. So I don't know. I think there's something to him there. And it's just every now and then you hear about these coaching candidates that are the next hot thing. And Mike McDaniel was the last version of that. And the Dolphins got a little aggressive and took a shot on Mike McDaniel, and it paid out beautifully. I think Brian Dable's another one that you heard really hyped up, and it panned out really well. And of course, that doesn't work out all the time, but I think Ryans is one of them. I like Morris a lot doing this research today. I might put Morris ahead of Dan Quinn even. Those two are like pretty close to me. Now I would have put like Dan Quinn, I think 4 prior to doing this research. Now I might have Morris 4 behind Ryan's, but I'd go Ryan's over Morris.
So what separates D'Amico Ryans to me is from everything I hear, he sounds like not just like, you get these guys in where it's like he's a leader of men. To me, from everything you hear, he sounds like he's like a special leader. Like that's like a big selling point for him, is like players are willing to run through a brick wall for him. And I also want to point this out. There is something to him being a former player and that correlating to also being a player's coach plus leader. Those are two things that I don't think always go hand in hand. I think that's an issue we saw with Hackett. And I think D'Amico Ryans like marries those perfectly. So that's kind of what puts him over the top for me there.
I love it. Robbie Davis over from Davis Breakdowns, friend of the show, came in and answered one of the concerns I had brought up earlier when we were talking about it. D'Amico's offensive plans would be interesting. Need to see if you can poach Greasy in some capacity. Samuel Castro, I think, echoes that sentiment as well. So yeah, that would actually answer that. And it's an interesting concept. We're going to jump right into it. Joey alluded to it a little bit earlier. Another defensive coordinator over from the Cowboys in Dan Quinn, who I would assume is a lot of people's number 3, just from the sheer fact that last year he was another front runner. I think it was pretty well aware that I thought Dan Quinn was going to be the head coach of the Denver Broncos going into last season. And instead we got Coach Nathaniel Hackett. So little change of pace there. I think the reason he is so high this season is a lot of carryover from the discussions of last cycle. I know there's going to be a little bit of a disagreement here, but guys, talk to me a little bit about Dan Quinn. Why or why not?
I think so. I'm not mad at him being interviewed, right? Like, I'm really not at all.
Him being in the top 6 is fine.
What was that?
Him being in the top 6 is fine.
Yeah. To me, this one is the biggest now move of any of these head coaches. We're bringing in the Seattle stuff for a couple reasons, right? We want to fix Russ right now. This is we're all in on Russ hire. We're going to bring in one of these Seattle offensive coordinators, Schottenheimer, right? We're going to have Dan Quinn, who has a good relationship with him. I mean, Benjamin Allwright tweeted me yesterday, and he said that the relationship between Dan Quinn and Peyton goes all the way back to 2005, where they roomed at some sort of function. I'm not sure what it was. He didn't specify, but that's how far back they go. So you have two connections there, right? You have the George Payton and then the Russell Wilson. And I think while you can argue that both of those guys, power is kind of being stripped away, or they're being a little humbled right now, they still, I mean, it benefits them both to have a guy like Dan Quinn. You're either going all in here and you're going all in there for both of those guys. So this is a big now move. And my issue is that I don't know if it's necessarily smart to put all your chips on the table for Russell Wilson. I'm not going to argue about whether he should be the guy next year. I'll leave that up to my co-host Zach Seegers here, who makes tremendous points about it. But I'm not going to argue that, but I will argue if you should go all in on that. It's hard for me to imagine Dan Quinn having life in Denver past Russell Wilson area. If it doesn't work out next year with Russell Wilson, where does Dan Quinn go from there? That's tough. That's really, really tough for me to imagine. It would seem like, to me, a Dan Quinn hire would mean that this either works with Russell Wilson or we are getting rid of George Payton, Russell Wilson, and Dan Quinn all at the same time. That's what that indicates to me. Whereas everyone else here I could see live past that a little bit. So that's kind of why I go back and forth, or I disagree with a lot of the Dan Quinn as being the third option choice.
Wouldn't that make the idea of moving off of all three of those main characters a little bit easier if you're doing a clean sweep after we gave it a good try? I don't know if I have connection still or
But
not.
you're doing one and done coaches back to back, and not only are you doing it, you're doing it as a new ownership group that hasn't proven themselves yet to the league, doesn't have a lot of strong league ties. Now every coach in the NFL has seen you go one and done back to back years with your coaches. Now I think some people might be understandable about like how this situation is unique and what caused it, but it could spook some teams. Now the Waltons have enough money to make people forget about that, you'd think, but it is a concern. What worries me about going with a guy like Quinn in that regard is the opposite. I think it gets Peyton security. I think it gets Russ security. And I don't think you want to be tied to this version of the Broncos for the next 2 seasons. Because if you're tied to them for the next 2 seasons, you're actually tied to them for 3. Because the moment this next season ends, the 2025 salary, which is north of 50 million, I believe it's 55, becomes fully guaranteed. So if you have Russ on the roster going into 2024, you're going to have him on the roster in 2025 as well, just because of how the contract works out. It gets even more painful to move on from him down the future. The claws dig in deeper. That's why they should do it now. But anyways, so if you don't want to go back-to-back one and done, you're looking at, I think, 2 to 3 more years of this Peyton-Russ marriage with Dan Quinn in there, regardless of if the results are appealing or not. And that would worry me a great deal. I also think Dan Quinn's resume is relatively unimpressive. He did a good job with Kyle Shanahan as his OC. He's got 600 and something winning percent. It might even be 707. He's got a very good winning percentage with Kyle Shanahan as his OC. Without him, he's more or less Vic Fangio. His resume is really not all that different from Vic Fangio without Kyle Shanahan by his side. He says one of the big things he learned during his time off of coaching was to be more of a CEO head coach and hire great coaches under him. Okay, well, let's look at the coaches he's hired under him. Kyle Shanahan, check. Steve Sarkisian, big miss. Dirk Cutter, bigger miss. Raheem Morris, I think, was a solid coach. But Raheem Morris being a solid coach almost makes Dan Quinn look bad, because both times defensive play calling, because it happened twice during Dan Quinn's tenure with the Falcons, both times defensive play calling was taken away from him. The defense got better. Also, I know I've said all these points before, but they warrant reiterating. He was the favorite for the job last year, entered as the clear favorite, as Joey laid out, 17-year close relationship, not just a relationship. 17-year close relationship with the sole man in charge of the job. And the Broncos wouldn't even give him a second interview because they thought the difference between him and Hackett was so great, right? Like that should be, that in itself is a red flag. He had the inside track. Everything pointed to Dan Quinn getting the job last year, and he couldn't even get a second interview because the difference between him and Hackett was so stark. That's a knock as well to me. He's very uninspiring to me. I think it would be.
So now move to me, man.
It's Teddy Bridgewater. It's what the Broncos have been doing at quarterback when they bring in Joe Flacco, when they bring in Case Keenum, when they bring in Teddy Bridgewater. Yeah, it could be worse, but this is also not the solution.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. I have nothing else to add there. I mean, yeah, I have nothing else to add there. To me, it's not a very inspiring move. I don't see it lasting too far in the future unless you are a massive, I don't know. I just don't see it lasting very long. Like, I really don't. To me, it's one that it's like a stepping stone, right? For the Broncos. We need to get someone in place so we can get to a next guy kind of deal to me.
Okay, fair. I think I spoke to a couple of Cowboys fans the other day and they said, go ahead, take him. So I don't know how I feel about it either.
Yeah.
I know. We'll hop on over to former Saints head coach Sean Payton. There's a little bit of a divide here, maybe a little bit of a, how does his relationship with players or organizations kind of trend. So I'd like to talk about Sean Payton. I think that it is, of the top 2 bunch, a coach who may cost a little bit more as far as draft capital is concerned, obviously, because you'll have to give up at least a first round pick. And that's not the only thing either. It's a good thing the Walton Penner Group has a ton of cash, but I think that'll come and play with the other candidate. Guys, talk to me a little bit about Sean Payton, because Jules Romero popped in here right away, coming in hot. Harbaugh or bust. We'll get to Harbaugh here in a moment. Zach, talk to me a little bit about Sean Payton, where you fall with that.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute. I think it was lagging. Sean Payton, I think, would be great. The big problem there, I think, is the investment, but the right head coach is probably worth that steep investment. So if you think he's the right head coach, why not go for it? See a comment that says Harbaugh or bust. I'm with it. I think Harbaugh's my comfortable number one, but Sean Payton has an amazing resume. Has as many losing seasons as a guy like Dan Quinn in like double the amount of time, or 3-4 times the amount of time as a head coach. Starkly better. You look at what he's done offensively, and you can say, oh, well, it's all Drew Brees. Look at the last few years of Drew Brees. He was not a great quarterback, and Sean Payton was getting the most out of him. Look at what he did with Teddy Bridgewater. Look at what he did with Taysom Hill. And I think it's very clear to see that he was not merely a product of Drew Brees. I also think the Drew Brees connection is valuable. I don't think the typical Sean Payton offense is maybe ideal for Russell Wilson. But again, he's shown the ability to pivot, especially with his ability to use a guy like Taysom Hill. You saw his offense change again when Jameis Winston was thrown in there. I think the connection with Drew Brees is valuable because Russ has long idolized Drew Brees, has modeled his game after Drew Brees. Who else better to get Russell Wilson on the right track than Drew Brees' longtime partner and offensive-minded coach? I think that's an appealing aspect of this. Sounds like he's a bit of a jerk, and there's, I think, the possibility that he could go, ooh, this Broncos situation sucks, and then up and leave after a year and two. I think that's a very real possibility. That'd be my biggest concern with Sean Payton. But yeah, he's a very successful NFL coach, one of the best over the league has seen over the past decade and a half. The Broncos would be lucky to have him as their head coach, I think.
With Cliff out at Arizona, I wonder if he wouldn't be a better potential fit over there, just because they're not, you have to decide whether or not you're keeping Kyler Murray, which direction they go into. It may be a more enviable position to be in outside of that. That's why I think the Sean Payton is kind of off the radar there for the Denver Broncos, but I'm not quite sure. Joe, you're back. Give me your thoughts. Sean Payton or someone else?
I like Sean Payton. Honestly, like, he's my number one guy right now. Sean Payton is my number one guy. If I could hire anyone, it would be Sean Payton. Now, the draft capital definitely plays a part, specifically because the next guy we talk about, I mean, I think that it's hard for me to really distinguish which one I love that much. But I treat this a lot like a quarterback. If I believe in a quarterback more, I'm willing to trade more capital for him. Like, this is a very important part of your team. Like, it sets the culture. It sets, like, there's no coach in any other sport I can think of that affects the game more than football. I think it's the second most important thing you establish. And Sean Payton's awesome. I don't know where all of the Sean Payton's overrated talk started from. I really don't, because I've never heard it in my entire life up until like 2.5 weeks ago. Never. Like, where did all this come from? I don't know. But Sean Payton is phenomenal. He's an offensive genius. There's a reason, like, Zach hit on this. Everyone says, oh, but Drew Brees was a Hall of Fame quarterback. He was not a Hall of Fame quarterback when Drew Brees got there. Teddy Bridgewater got a big contract after working with him. Jameis, he had a different offense. Like, he's an offensive genius. Sean Payton has been established as that. He had so many good teams in New Orleans. I don't have a ton of huge red flags for him. Zach mentioned that, hey, he left New Orleans. My rebuttal to that would be, but he gave them like more than a decade of time. Like, at what point are we okay with a guy leaving? If he stayed for, like, I don't know. Like, he gave his time. I feel like it's okay if he leaves, goes sits in the booth for a year and then decides I'm going to go look for a better job elsewhere. I don't really have an issue with that. It does sound like he might be a jerk, but my also rebuttal to that would be, why are so many teams willing to trade a first for him then? Like, why is he rumored to go to this place, and this place if the league doesn't love him? That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Sean Payton, if they were all on the table, I would want Sean Payton the most.
Okay. All right. I didn't know if you're going to elaborate more on that. I'm just reading through the comments. A lot of people are happy to be in here. And I love Robbie's comment here. So I'm going to read it off real quick. Do any other candidates have a critically acclaimed Oscar-worthy film about them? Hashtag waiting for Peyton. We got to get it trending, Robbie. I don't think we've done a good enough job in doing so. So yeah, really great stuff out of there. Finally, I think we have to round it out with what seems to be the number one overall Vegas favorite. Vegas odds have been going absolutely crazy for James Joseph Harbaugh. I think there's a reason why. It's going to cost a pretty penny, but the bag is not going to be an issue for the Denver Broncos. I need to hear from you, and I've been asking you guys since the news has been running. Why? Convince me why. And now the floor is yours. Why is Jim Harbaugh the odds-on favorite for the next head coach of the Denver Broncos?
I mean, I think he's the odds-on favorite because he understands he probably isn't going to win a national championship in the college game. He's ready to go pro, and hey, why not? He's a really good pro coach. As for why the Broncos should hire him, he's my number one pick. The same thing Joey just said about Peyton, I would say about Harbaugh. What I like about Harbaugh, if I'm debating him versus Peyton, is we've seen him go a bunch of different places and build up programs from the ground up and have success. And they've all taken on Harbaugh's image. He has a very clear identity he brings to his teams, and we've seen it replicated several times, and we've seen it replicated successfully several times, and in bad places too. Goes to the University of San Diego, makes them pretty good. Goes to Stanford, which is a 1-11 program before he gets there. And by the time he leaves, they're 11-1 team and are getting the top are developing Andrew Luck into this prodigious quarterback talent. Goes to the NFL and immediately turns 49ers crew that had a 7-year stretch that is like 3 wins better than the 7-year stretch the Broncos just endured. And in year 1 has them in the NFC Championship game, a play away from the Super Bowl. They play the first 3 years of Harbaugh, they make it to the Final Four every single year. And every single year they give the Super Bowl champion, that Super Bowl champion's best fight of the season. They nearly knocked the Ravens off in the Super Bowl the year they make it to the Super Bowl. They have the famous Michael Crabtree, Richard Sherman game in the NFC Championship before the Seahawks throttle the Broncos. That NFC Championship might have as well been the Super Bowl. And then you see the first time around, returner muffed a punt against the Giants in overtime, and it leads to the Giants winning that game. Just a remarkable coach. I think he's not very likable, but everywhere he goes, he's an offensive backgrounded guy, and everywhere he goes, he makes the defenses play much better. I heard a critique that he's not a big X's and O's guy, and I'd push back on that because I think, again, he's instilled a clear run game identity that has also been successful everywhere he's been. And that type of run game, ground and pound, smash mouth philosophy is, I think, the way you want to build this roster if you're continuing on with Russ. If you're of the mindset you don't want to continue on with Russ, you should also love Jim Harbaugh because he's one of the coaches that's going to come in and have the power to move off of Russell Wilson and has the background that leads you to believe he can build this program back up in the right direction. I think Harbaugh's the preeminent program builder, and to have him available is very promising. I think he's exactly what the Broncos need.
Wayne King has a similar question to one I asked you guys earlier today in the group chat. He's getting old a little bit. I don't believe that he will have the coaching longevity with Denver that Peyton will have. He follows up, Wayne King, looking for a long-term coach so we can get off this coaching merry-go-round. So I think Zach Seegers had a great – also, you had a really great answer to my question of, does it get old? Can you just give the LTB community an idea of what head coaching tenure looks like in the NFL?
Absolutely. So the long-term coach thing's big. Also, they're Harbaugh and Sean Payton are the exact same age. They're both 59 years old. So Payton might look a little younger, but um, uh, also we're seeing coaches coach into their 70s now fairly regularly. I'm not all that worried about either of those guys walking away from the game in the near future. Now, one fair knock I've heard on Harbaugh is that he wears people thin, and so he's better at the college game where he's only around people 4 or 5 years because he doesn't wear them down as much. The problem is he'll only be successful for 4 or 5 years, okay, sign me up for it. Of the 32 coaching spots in the NFL, head coaching spots in the NFL, 11 are occupied by a coach that's been with the team for 4 seasons. 11, like 1/3. If he makes it to the point where he's a problem in the locker room or whatever, you're already assuming he's one of the top third coaches, or he's in the top third of NFL head coaches. Because to stick around, you are being successful. So I'm fine with that. If the problem is he is going to turn the program around and put them in a better spot for 4 years, and then he'll start to wear people thin and you'll have to move on from him, okay. I feel the same way about like CU. Hey, Dion might not be there for very long. Okay. He's going to make them a lot better. And then when he leaves, they're going to be in a better spot than where he found them at. Harbaugh is a program builder. He's done it time and time again. If it's short-lived, fine, because 4 years in the NFL head coaching world isn't short-lived. That's a long tenure in the NFL head coaching world. That's better than average.
Joey.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with a lot of points Zach made about Harbaugh. I mean, I messaged you guys about this earlier, and I kind of just want to bring it to the podcast. I just think it makes a ton of sense, right? Like, I think this is the one that makes the most sense. Specifically from the Broncos' point of view, right? You have connections there with Condoleezza Rice, who was part of the team that hired him at Stanford. You already have that connection built. Then I look at it from Harbaugh's point of view, and you could take it all the way back to those San Francisco days to where when he got in a fight with the at time GM, and it seemed like a little bit of a power struggle, right? What do the Broncos do? The Broncos have an opportunity where you are reporting directly to the owner. Now it sounds like he might leave Michigan because of a money issue. Like he wants more cash. What do the Broncos have? A ton of cash. And then when I'm looking at, I keep seeing people say, oh, what coaches do you think want to go play in a division with Justin Herbert and Pat Mahomes? I haven't seen Jim Harbaugh shy away from that competition whatsoever. He took a 1-win Stanford team and made them good. He took on a San Francisco job that had Alex Smith at the time, and he looked like a bust. That was the perception with everybody, was that Alex Smith was a bust. Took that job on. It doesn't seem like that's going to be a huge deal with him. So it just seems like it's a perfect fit, really. I think the only two options here, I would be shocked to see Harbaugh move up and it not be the Broncos. I don't think there's another team that can offer him the amount of power and money the Broncos can offer him. I don't think there's any. So if he moves up, I imagine that it would be for the Broncos or he stays at Michigan. Those are the only two options I really see here. I'll be shocked to see anything else.
And to that point, Odds Checker released odds on. Now, there's two different categories. There's who is going to be the Broncos' next head coach, and where is Jim Harbaugh going to be coaching next season. On the where is Jim Harbaugh going to be coaching next season odds, the Denver Broncos are now the favorite over Michigan, his currently employed place, which is a rarity. These, I don't know what you want to call them, these listings we often see with player trades like Aaron Rodgers. I can remember it was with him. With Russell Wilson, too. You'll see these odds like, where will this player be or coach be or whatever in 2023? And their current home, their current team is almost always, whenever I've seen it just about, the heavy favorite. And then the field, it kind of gets like split up amongst them all. We're now at the point where the Broncos are the favorite. And I think that's very interesting. I think it's like a implied 25% chance or something, which is great. then, or I think it's even like 30. And then on the who will be the Broncos' next head coach odds, you've got Dan Quinn number 1, which yucky. But then Jim Harbaugh's right there at number 2. So very, very good chance he's the Denver Broncos' next head coach.
Listen, you guys are getting me super excited for a Hall of Fame head coach to come in with a ton of experience and just a whole lot of what could go wrong, right? Well, I've been here once before, so I will be a little bit hesitant as we go into this conversation and getting my hopes up. And then once the hire is made, I think I will also reserve a little bit of hopefulness and excitement for this new iteration of the Denver Broncos. It feels like we were just here. But it's okay. And that's going to be all right. We'll have plenty of discussions with the Let's Talk Broncos community as we've been doing so right now. So I appreciate everybody with all of the comments. It's going to be a fun off season. I look forward to talking about it with not only Zach Seegers and Joey Richards, but with all of you. And now on that note, it's time for literally everyone's favorite segment of the night. And that is Joey's question of the day.
Yes, Joey's question of the day. This graphic is all right. There's 2 coaches on this list that have already interviewed with the Broncos before. Who are those 2 coaches?
Oh, I didn't hear the question. Sorry.
All good. There's 2 coaches who are being interviewed currently. They're part of the Broncos 6 who have already been interviewed for the Broncos head coach position in the past. Who are those head coaches?
Dan Quinn and Raheem Morris.
Ooh, Bree nailed it.
Good
2008.
Stuff,
Dan Quinn was easy. I didn't know if you guys were going to get the Raheem Morris
it
one.
was sneaky.
The Bucks hired Raheem Morris, but the Broncos did interview him that year. So that's the answer there, yeah.
There is thoughts behind and in between my ears. I feel really good about that. And Zach didn't have a chance to cut me off. I think he was being nice. He paused a little bit. Thanks for letting me sneak one in there. Guys, where can everybody find your stuff?
Yeah, everybody. Follow me at JR Drafts on Twitter. I've been tweeting a ton about this coach stuff. I want to give a shout out to Robbie Davis, who's been in the chat this entire. He's like just a wealth of information when it comes to these coaching stuff. I get so much information from him, and I think he's going to bring some breakdowns over to the pod about some of these coaches, which I would be stoked about, and actually get you guys a better idea about what these coaches do. Because I mean, online, like you can tell, it's really hard for people to evaluate these coaches and get a real grasp of what they bring. Robbie does a great job at showing what these coaches bring. So make sure you're following him at Robbie. What is it? Robbie Davis.
Robbie _ NFL.
Robbie _ NFL. Make sure you're following him there. No question about it. Especially
I literally had it on the screen, Joseph. Oh my God.
He is.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
But he's amazing. Got to get those coaching breakdowns hopefully from him. I'm excited what he brings to the show and want to get a lot more of it this offseason.
Yes. And then make sure you're following all my work at Mile High Sports. Frankie and I do a draft show every single Thursday. It is draft season. So make sure you guys are tuning into that. You guys can go back and rewatch those shows as well. But yeah, that's all I really have. Zach, where can they find your work, man?
Yeah, find me over at Zach _ Seegers on Twitter, milehighsports.com. I have really lengthy deep dives into, I've probably already written like 500 to 600 words on every single one of these interview candidates. I'm going to write more as more interview candidates come out and get listed, as second interviews happen. I'll probably even write a column ranking all of them and arguing all of those points. I've got end of season awards coming. I've got end of season stock up, stock down coming. I've got lists of top free agents at all the positions that the Broncos should go get. It is my crazy column list season, so please go check that stuff out. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. If you would like to hear more of Zach and myself, you can find us every single Monday. Just because the season's over doesn't mean we stop talking. 1 to 2 p.m. for the Fan Cave on Mile High Sports Radio. And then you can find all of my work over on Twitter at BreeMaces303. Guys, real quick for you, we're going to end the show on I don't even know what note this is, but Wayne King wants to know, what about that game last night? One word. You get one word.
One word, terrible.
Zach, one word.
Nuggets. Watch the first half, turn it off, turn on the Nuggets game.
Yeah, I did the
Enjoy
same
that.
thing.
Let's go.
It was almost one word. You almost did it. Guys, we'll talk to you. We'll be back, right? Thursday episode. Don't miss I almost said what's on draft. Let's talk draft. And we'll see you for some more Let's Talk Broncos. We'll announce that over on our Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, social, so you can see it. And we'll set a reminder for all you folks over on YouTube. Have a good night.